I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with
Rebecca Wood,
my co-host, and together we are bringing you a very special episode of For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about the economy and the ecology and the environment and how they affect you, your family, your health, your wealth, your happiness. And we're particularly well prepared. I mean, we're often well prepared for this show, but this week we're
mostly Joe is well prepared.
But we have quite a show lined up for you. We got all kinds of interesting things happening. One thing that's interesting about this particular date, I don't know if anybody has told you this, but today is 02/02/2020. So it's like a palindrome day, which is kind of cool. And we have a great guest coming. Markie Miller is going to be joining us to talk about Lake Erie Bill of Rights. Then we're going to be we got a letter from a listener. So a nice, big, long, thoughtful letter. We're going to talk about that. And, of course, our letter from the future, from the year 2300, my great-great-granddaughter Marie I. All that's in store. But right now, at the beginning of the show here, I wanted to talk about, this is a sports station, 106.5 FM, and we're very happy to be here. Normally, this station's talking about ESPN things and sports. And usually I tell people, don't worry, sports is coming back at 9 o'clock with Mick Gonzalez and the Cheap Seats, which it is.
Now it's back. No!
But we, this week, are going to talk about the Super Bowl because, it's this weekend. Today's the Super Bowl Sunday. And so I wanted to look at the two cities that are competing in the Super Bowl, Kansas City and San Francisco, and do a matchup in terms of eco-ness. Like which city if you're rooting, if you don't have a skin in the game in terms of, like you used to live in Kansas City or something like that, and you're just trying to decide based on ecology which city you should be rooting for, I matched them up, and it's surprising.
Well, also, okay, like people I know have this complex system of figuring out who they want to win according to who is enemies of their team or enemies of friends of their teams or friends of it or something. It's really complex.
Oh, yeah.
Like we want these guys to lose because they're bad, and so then my team can beat them maybe, or in the case of the Browns, not lose to them too badly.
Oh, right, exactly.
Lose by a lower margin or even tie. Yay.
I know. When I was following the Buffalo Bills those 4 years they went to the Super Bowl,
right,
4 years in a row and lost, one of the worst losses was to Houston. And so, of course, in the next Super Bowl that Houston was playing, I, of course, was rooting for whoever was opposed to Houston.
Right,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. It's logical from a certain point of view. And so who are you rooting for? Eco-wise for the Super Bowl. So you can call in at any time, 866-240-1065. 866-240-1065. This is the best show in Ohio, but it gets better every time you call. So looking at the two cities, of course, Kansas City and San Francisco, you would think just eco-wise, it's got to be San Francisco, right? I mean, that's the
stereotypically, yeah.
Right, that's the granola capital of the world, and
but also lots of money, lots of tech. Where there's money tends to want to make more money and not save the environment. So
yeah, so I mean, just looking at the stats, just looking at the basic stats, it's an interesting contrast. Population, the city is about 491,000. The greater metropolitan area is about 2.1 million. San Francisco, the city is about twice the population, 890,000, and the greater metropolitan area is 7.75 million. So a lot more people in the San Francisco area, but the area is almost reversed. Kansas City, the square area in square miles, Kansas City is 319 square miles. It's huge and sprawling. Whereas San Francisco, those 890,000 people are living in 47 square miles.
Wow.
So it's incredibly densely populated, which ecologically, that could be good or it could be bad, depending on how efficiently everyone's living together. And one of the things that would make you be able to decide if a city is livable with that density is how many parks there are. And San Francisco is very proud of their park system. In those 47 square miles, they have 220 parks. And every resident in San Francisco lives within a 10-minute walk of some kind of park.
Most of my information about San Francisco comes from murder mysteries because a lot of people like to set them there. And I know there are parks because bodies are always being found in parks in the books I read about San Francisco.
All right. Well,
probably other stuff happens too. It's not just murder, but that's just what I like to read.
Well, I didn't look at the cities in terms of fictional murder rate.
I know. Well, it's like a gap in your whole perspective.
I would guess San Francisco would just blow Kansas City away in that.
Yeah, probably
department.
So. Yeah.
But interestingly, Kansas City has 221 parks. So Kansas City actually has more parks than San Francisco.
Cool.
And Kansas City's parks are much, much larger. In fact, there's 29 lakes inside the Kansas City park system.
Cool.
So San Francisco's got a lot, but a lot of them are just these tiny little pocket things.
And my friend, this photographer who's been living in Finland, from California, been living in Finland for the last decade or so, says that there's a lake for every, I think, 33 people it was in Finland. So he's very comfortable there as a California boy.
Oh,
There's
nice.
lots of water.
Okay, so parks-wise, Kansas City actually edges out San Francisco just by a little bit. And so then I thought, well, let's look at climate action plan, CO2. And it turns out that since 2006, the city of Kansas City has had a climate protection plan, and they are committed to reducing the amount of carbon that they put out.
Good for them.
Well, and not just good, also effective, because since they started the program in 2006, the city government has reduced its carbon emissions by 40%, and the community as a whole has managed to reduce their emissions by 21%. So that's pretty impressive, and kind of foresighted because they've been doing this since 2006. I mean, Toledo and Columbus would do very well to follow their lead. But then I checked out San Francisco, and of course on this stat, San Francisco blows Kansas City away because Kansas City's CO2 plan went into place. Their climate action plan started in 1990. And since 1990, they weren't able to separate their city and their community amounts, but the community-wide, they've reduced their carbon by 36%. So
good deal.
Yeah, and that's from 1990 to 2019. So in terms of CO2, San Francisco does edge out to Kansas City. But again, part of that is geography. Since people don't have to travel as much, to get to where they're going in San Francisco as they do in that big spread out with Kansas City. So
also, you have to remember in songs, Kansas City is famous for both being up to date, quote unquote, and also being the home of crazy little women.
Really?
Yeah, crazy little women, and I'm gonna move to Kansas City, blah blah blah.
I haven't heard.
I don't
that
know
song.
whether there are really crazy little women there or how that affects the environment exactly.
Well, I didn't. This isn't comprehensive. I don't have San Francisco stats versus Kansas
Right.
City in terms of crazy little women, but
Which could have an impact. We don't know.
yeah. But one thing that we've talked about though on this show quite a bit is that public transportation makes a difference in terms of ecological impact and in terms of prosperity in the city that you're in. So comparing public transportation, again, you think that Kansas City would get blown away by San Francisco, but no, Kansas City has a very strong public transportation system. And in fact,
Cool.
December 6th, Kansas City voted to become the first major city in the United States to offer completely free public transit to everyone.
Woo. So, okay, what size are they compared to Toledo, Kansas City?
Well, they've got about 491,000 in the city,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's comparable.
Okay, because we're always hearing that, we're too small a city, we can't afford public transit here.
Yeah,
So
no,
I've always suspected that was nonsense,
that is kind of nonsense.
to use a polite word.
And since public transit has such a great benefit to economically, it's more like we're such a poor city because we don't have the public transit.
Yeah, everybody was saying, I don't want to go downtown because there's too much, costs too much to park. Well, with public transportation, it wouldn't if
Right.
it was reliable and regular and stuff, and
Yeah,
more routes, more runs.
or even perhaps free.
Yeah,
So-
free.
So
would
it's
be bomb.
a huge experiment, and so I'm given. So even though San Francisco, of course, they've got hybrid buses, they've got streetcars everywhere, electric streetcars, and of
Wow.
course the famous iconic cable cars that go up and down the hills. Even though they've got all that and they've had it forever, I'm giving Kansas City the score on that one.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of doing a bold new thing that no one else has dared try yet. So
Cool points for KC.
all right. So really this matchup is a lot closer than you'd think.
Yeah.
And so then I looked at air pollution, and Kansas City's air is not amongst the cleanest and it's not amongst the dirtiest. It's somewhere in the middle, the air quality. Unfortunately for San Francisco, on this one they really lose out to yes.
Yeah,
You're
was
raising
it
your eyebrows.
California, like mountains and fog and it all?
Yep,
hangs
mountains
up on
and
'em
fog
sometimes,
and the geography and the topography puts, according to the American Lung Association, on the average, San Francisco has the 6th worst air in the country.
Somehow the mountains sort of trap the bad air where it's at sometimes, I
Exactly,
guess.
and it doesn't clear out.
Maybe
so,
wind off the ocean and then I don't know. I forget the exact mechanics.
right. So even though they have a lot of really good public transportation, all the exhaust from the cars that they do have settles and stays right there.
Right.
And one important thing about that, because we were talking about how Denver has that same problem, is that in other cities that don't have the geography that concentrates it, it's not so much that they're generating less pollution, it's just that their pollution gets distributed out to the rest of us, to the rest of the world.
They
So-
share.
Right. So it's like these really polluted cities, all the cities are actually like that. It's just on
Right.
some of them it gets spread out more and you don't get that concentration. But in terms of air quality, Kansas City knocks San Francisco out of the park.
Wow.
And so I looked at one more, and that was water quality. And in terms of water quality, actually Kansas City loses out. San Francisco has a really, really great water system. They actually get a lot of their water from Yosemite, and they tunnel it in. So Yosemite is like this beautiful protected area, and that's why San Francisco has really clean water. On chromium, they had 0.06 parts per billion, and strontium, they only had 99 parts per billion, whereas Kansas City gets their water from the Missouri River, which is contaminated by a lot of industry and farm runoff. And so on like chromium, they've got 7 parts per billion, instead of 0.06. And strontium, they've got 221 parts per billion instead of 99. So in water quality, San Francisco wins. So really, in terms of the Super Bowl, who you're supposed to root for, because it's more ecologically, it's kind of a toss-up.
Wow.
Yeah. So I picked Kansas City just because Midwestern city, and they're trying harder.
That's right.
San Francisco's sort of been resting on its laurels.
Exactly.
For a long time,
yeah.
So.
KC is the underdog.
All right. Do you agree with me, or do you think we should go with San Francisco just because, how could you not in terms of ecology? But you can call in at 866-240-1065, and we'd be happy to talk with you. But right now, we are happy to talk with our guest. We are being joined by Markie Miller. Markie, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks so much for calling in.
Yeah, thank you for having me on again.
Yes, well, I was just telling Rebecca on the way here that you are actually like our most frequent guest now, because I think this is the fourth or maybe even the fifth time you've been on. So we really appreciate it. Yeah. So the reason I asked you on this week is because, of course, there's been some developments in the Lake Erie Bill of Rights situation. We have, as most of our listeners know, Toledo passed the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, which gives legal rights to Lake Erie, which basically meant that anybody could go into court representing Lake Erie and sue to protect it. But then the Ohio State Legislature put a little provision, I believe it was in a budget bill, that negated Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And so now the city and the state and some farmer went to court this past Tuesday to argue about it. And so could you pick the story up from there? What happened on Tuesday? Well, first, again, remind us who you are and who you're with, and then let's talk about what happened on Tuesday.
Sure. I'm Markie Miller, and I'm an organizer with Toledoans for Safe Water, which is just our local group that put this law together, campaigned for it, canvassed. We collected the 10,500 signatures for it. And the budget bill that you're referring to, that happened actually way after the lawsuit that was filed by a corporation that the state of Ohio then intervened on. So it was only about 10 hours after the election, and we got word about this, a corporation that said they were harmed by us passing the Lake Erie Bill of Rights and that they wanted to take action against the city of Toledo. So on Tuesday, the 28th, we had oral arguments in federal court, and those occurred in Toledo. And it was really interesting because so now it's time for the corporation to have a voice in why they feel people should not have a right to clean and safe water in this way. And the state of Ohio was there on their side, and the city of Toledo had a local law firm, Spengler and Nathanson. So it was probably the first time in an American court where rights of nature was really argued like this. And I have to say, it was very frustrated that we were not allowed to be part of this lawsuit, that we weren't allowed to have a voice in that courtroom. But the city did an incredible job. Their attorney that they had, Sarah Scout, she was amazing. She really was there representing us and standing up for this law and for this community.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really good to hear that the city of Toledo stepped up to the plate on this, because this is a really intense, a really interesting question in terms of society and in terms of philosophy, that just the idea, does nature have any rights, or are we, humans, the only beings with rights on this planet, which, would seem counterintuitive, because the survival of nature, our rights are absolutely dependent upon nature being healthy and having at least the right to exist and thrive and flourish. I think you're, as the statutes, I believe, says. So how did it go, and where where's the process now? I mean, have all the arguments been made and now it's just wait for the judge's decision, or is this going to be continuing?
To my knowledge, all the arguments have been made, so we're just waiting for Judge Zahari to give his decision. So yeah, it's a bit of a waiting game, but it was really, for me, I was really emotional during the entire thing. I mean, my heart is in this. My group worked so hard. It was hard not to be, but it wasn't sadness. It was like, wow, we have to stop for a minute and look at what we did and what we're living through right now, what we're experiencing, that we're forcing our state to step up here and argue a corporate right. And that came up a lot. The farm that filed the lawsuit is Dravis Farm Partnership. And, I always like to point that out. It was not, Mark Dravis from this corporation. It was the actual corporation that filed it. And the theme of their argument was our constitutional rights are being trampled, our corporate right, our First Amendment corporate right. We don't have a voice in this. We don't have a say. And the city's response was, you also don't have a constitutional right to pollute, and you don't have a constitutional right to poison people. And so I think it was really, really powerful, because we talk about these topics, we talk about corporate rights, we talk about rights of nature, but to see them really argued out, that's what it comes down to. That, like you're saying, humans have a right to exist and flourish here, and our state is saying, oh, so do corporations, so does business. So that is the argument that we need to start confronting, and out of that confrontation will come change.
And people can say, oh, it's crazy, the lake doesn't have sentience, nature isn't aware, so it can't have constitutional rights, but neither is a corporation, and they've been given constitutional rights, so how crazy is that, really?
Right.
And we're already in crazy land, basically, when we gave them rights.
Yeah, and
right.
I mean, all the individuals in a corporation have rights, and so to put the corporate rights on top of that is to sort of say, well, these people have double rights.
Yeah.
They have more rights than anybody else because they're in a corporation, which, of course, goes contrary to the whole all men are created equal, or all humans are created equal idea. So I understand that there was a pretty good crowd that at the hearing, that a lot of people turned out, and what was the mood of those people?
Yeah, well, I think I was the only one crying, but it was crazy. But we had a picket line out front. Advocates for a Clean Lake Erie put that together for us on their own. We were like, we can't even, stand up. We can't fathom putting this together. They got all their members out into the picket line in the morning, which is really great to also get that support from another group. So people were out picketing in the cold at 9 in the morning, and then we all tried to go in. I was actually the last person that was allowed through for a while. They weren't going to let anybody else in. They said, no, we're at capacity. And there was still plenty of room upstairs, so they let a few more people come in. But then I found out afterwards that there were some 30 or 40 people that were forced to wait downstairs and put into a side room to watch. So I don't think the courthouse gets that many people very often. And some people were telling us, oh, it's okay, there's standing room only. Other people who work there said, absolutely not, you can't stand, you have to sit. So I think they were a little frazzled having so many people in there. But I couldn't believe it when I walked out and there's just gobs of people downstairs, because they all got withheld on the first floor and stayed and watched this trial unfold. So
how long did the trial take?
It was about 90 minutes.
Wow.
It started at 10, so it was definitely over the first hour, and I actually thought it would be a lot shorter. So I'm just like sitting on pins and needles, because I'm like, oh, they're not done yet, and I know time is ticking down here, and it just kept going and kept going, and
Still,
that was exhausting.
Still, it's really not that much time to go over such a huge fundamental question. It seems to be. I mean,
right.
The Native Americans, if they had a question like this, might take a year to actually come to a decision. But 90 minutes, wow, that's kind of. Well, I just reread The Lord of the Rings, and I was reading about the Ents, and as the Ents would say, that's kind of hasty.
That's true. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
that's we took a year writing it and planning it and putting it together and collaborating on it. And you're right to see it. Okay, give me your best arguments in the short amount of time. It's quite ridiculous. And you do have a sense that most likely the decision has already been made. I don't walk into this feeling confident that we're going to have access to any kind of justice as we view it, because this body of work is about changing a system of law, and we've been cornered into a situation that uses that same law and those same rules to, validate this work. And so there's something that align there. That being said, I think it is still important because you have to create those moments of opposition, and you have to get those arguments out there and hope that eventually people, judges who have to listen to this, and people who listen to this will go, I guess I don't agree with this anymore, and this doesn't really reflect the values that I have. This doesn't reflect the community that I want to live in, the society I want to live in.
It's kind of more about planting the seed of an idea. This is a very new idea, and you got in on the ground level,
Right. But rights of nature has been blocked from the Ohio courts for 10 years. So it is cool to see, we're breaking through, but we're also seeing the cracks in the foundation that initiatives before us couldn't get through. So it's to watch it build and to watch what it's trying to overtake start to fall down. That's a really significant moment, and it's going to happen really slowly, and it's going to happen in little pieces and little sections. So it's going to be hard to step back and see the progress, but we actually have made a ton of progress with rights of nature and community rights here.
Well, plus, it's a kind of a moment for environmental stuff. As people see more sort of natural global disasters, the opinion could swing our way more quickly than we think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually did come up in the case as well. And there's a sort of a preamble in the start of our law where we do talk about the different impacts on Lake Erie, and one of them that they mentioned in there is climate change. Mm-hmm. And the judge kind of tried to scoff at it a little bit and what about that? And the lawyer for the city was real quick, and she was just like, this community is recognizing that we are living in a time of climate crisis, and we have to do something, and it was like everybody in the courtroom just kind of they weren't expecting her to have an answer for it at all. But that is a reality, and it's a scary reality, and it's so much easier to say that's a future thing, that's in the distance. But to see people start arguing the clock is ticking.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to start snapping people out.
I think that's the ultimate irony about all this is that the corporation, the farm that is fighting this idea is actually going to be harmed by the very things that this law, this effort to recognize the rights of nature would protect against. So it's like they're arguing, hey, our society should be able to just, destroy itself with these pollutants, and including the economic ruin.
I wonder how late in the season they had to plant their crops last year.
Yeah, they may not have even had a crop last year, in part because of the whole climate crisis. But they're still there arguing. But we should get to keep doing this, because here's drawing the connection, the line. I mean, farms put the nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen into the Maumee River. The Maumee River carries them into Lake Erie. In Lake Erie, they have the algal blooms, and those algal blooms produce methane gas, which is a tremendous greenhouse gas, much more potent even than CO2, and so that feeds back into the climate crisis. And so, protecting the lake actually is protecting that farm that is fighting the idea of protecting the lake. And so, it's a very, hopefully the courts will see reason here, that they'll see some sanity. But you mentioned the other organization that was helping you out. Actually, a lot of organizations and governments all over the world have been looking at this whole attempt here in Toledo, haven't they?
Oh, yeah. And I can say that after we passed our law, Florida, there were groups in Florida that reached out to us, and they now have 13 counties working on similar initiatives.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
it's spreading.
Yeah, let's knock on wood. Now, the Native American societies, of course, did take into account in their decision-making processes nature, that when they decided things like, well, are we going to keep our village here or do we move the village, they would use the condition and the health of the environment around them as part of that decision-making process. So they recognized the rights of nature in their councils and in their decisions. And I think that's something that's one reason their society stayed stable for something like 10,000 years. And we would do well, if we want to have a stable, sustainable society, we do well to emulate that. So,
right.
All right. Well, Markie, thank you very much for coming in. So this decision, I'm sorry, what level of court was this? Was this the county court or city court? Or?
It was federal.
That was the federal court. Okay.
It was federal court.
And so decisions here would have to go, if they were appealed, they'd go to the federal court of appeals, and then eventually they could end up at the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we're going to keep following the story as long as it keeps going. So,
all right.
Thanks very much, Markie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you
for being a guest. All right. That was Markie Miller with Toledoans for Safe Water. What did you think? Give a call at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. And what did you think of Markie's, of the whole Lebor thing, the whole Lake Erie Bill of Rights? Did you agree with it? Were you kind of secretly glad when the state knocked it out of the law? Let us know. And so this, speaking of courts and court cases, this brings us to what will be our final House Bill 6 update. Unfortunately, what had happened was there was a company that was gathering petition signatures to overturn House Bill 6, and that company last week actually gave up the fight in court. So they ran out of money, basically, which is the problem when you have democracy being tied solely to money. This is why private corporations should not have rights of voting and free speech, because then the question just becomes which corporation has more money, not whether or not they're right on the issue. House Bill 6 was a terrible law, should never have been put into practice or put into place, and every legislator who voted for it should be ashamed of themselves and embarrassed in front of their constituents, because they're they're putting fees on their constituents to support coal and nuclear power, which need to be eliminated, and they've eliminated all the support for wind and solar power. Horrible law, but the companies that were fighting over it, the company that has the coal and the nuclear had more money than the company fighting for clean air or for wind and solar. And so the one that had more money won. And that has no bearing, zero bearing on the question itself, on the democratic question and on the question of democracy, since 70% of Ohioans opposed House Bill 6.
What the people wanted was just barely a consideration, if at all.
Yeah, it was. So this was, unfortunately, with the ending of that court case where the company gathering petitions was asking for more time. That's the end of the controversy or the fight for House Bill 6. Now just comes your bills going up. But don't worry, your bills won't go up until after the November election, because the Republicans who wrote the bill made darn sure that you're not going to see that increase until after you voted for them and put them back into office. So,
oh, boy.
Yeah. So, all right. That's the final House Bill 6 update. Okay. Now it's time to hear from our sponsor. For a Green Future is sponsored by the Wood County Park District. And the Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature, restore wildlife habitats, and lead outdoor adventures. They protect 20 parks and nature preserves around Wood County, and those are all open from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And we have, by way of a public announcement, and by the way, if anybody has an environmental or ecological event that they want promoted on our show, just send us an email at joe@joedemar for a Green Future, or give us a call at 419-973-5841, and we'll most likely, I'm not going to guarantee, but most likely we'll announce what's going on the air. So, but there's a lot going on at the Wood County Park Districts. On this coming Thursday, February 6th, from 7 to 9, they're having an Eco-Lit book group meeting at the WW Nature Preserves, and people are getting together. They're going to talk about a book entitled The Home Place, Memoirs of a Colored Man's Love Affair with Nature by J. Drew Lanham. And that group meets every single month. So that's Thursday. Then next Saturday, February 8th, they're going to teach spinning. They're having a beginning spinning course. Learn the history of spinning, beginning with the drop spindle. And that program does cost $10. The leader is Deb Yeagle of the Black Swamp Spinners Guild. And then Tuesday, February 11th, sounds like lots of fun, the Escape the Nature Center 2 at the Bradner Interpretive Center on North Fostoria Road in Bradner. They're going to have challenges and puzzles, and you're going to have to use your wits and nature knowledge and teamwork to solve puzzles to escape the nature center. Otherwise, you just have to stay there forever, I guess.
Yeah.
Then another really interesting in their series of wild self-defense. And now this one sounds funny, but this one might actually be really useful, wild self-defense. It might really someday save your life. They're going to teach you to defend yourself against moose and deer. That's Friday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. What?
I imagine that a lot of that defense it consists of the advice, back the heck up. Don't get in front of it to begin with.
Well, yeah, it's like how to avoid too close of an encounter and
right.
How to defend yourself because deer and moose have been known to attack people. So, and what better way to spend Valentine's Day with your loved one than learning how to avoid a moose attack?
Because they might think you're a bigger, more important moose who's after their ladies.
It's possible. So that's,
or their babies if they are a lady moose.
That's the 14th at the WW Night Nature Preserves. Then they're going to have on the 16th, next Sunday, intermediate orienteering at the Bradner Interpretive Center. And then on February 19th, the following Wednesday, they have frog monitor training. And they're basically going to teach you to identify frogs based on their sound. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, when you're walking along in the spring and you hear all those different frogs going, sounds.
But that's not part of the self-defense series, right? Just
no,
to be clear. Okay.
No,
I feel like I can defend myself against frogs, basically.
Well, most
if I have
frogs,
to.
although some of those American bullfrogs get.
Right.
I mean,
Don't put your hand in their mouth would probably be the first advice about defending yourself from those.
Yeah, I remember I was working once in a trench, and there was a bird up on the perch on the side of the trench, and as I was digging, I was listening, going chirp, 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 and then all of a sudden it went chirp. And I turned around, and there was this huge American bullfrog and just this little cloud of feathers dropping down.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, that thing was over a foot long.
Wow.
Okay. Anyway, then the Tuesday the 25th is Beekeeping Good For You. Wednesday the 26th, Animals of the Nature Center. And to find out about all these things, you can register at woodcountyparks.org, wcparks.org, or call them at 419-353-1897. So that's the Wood County Parks, and we're very grateful to have them as a sponsor. And we're also very grateful to our patrons. We have a number of patrons who've gone to patreon.com, and they have signed up for a very small monthly deduction from their checking account. They are helping to bring you For a Green Future. And if you're one of those people who likes For a Green Future, and one of those people who likes to support the things that you like to see happening in the world, you too can go to patreon.com. It's very easy, very quick, and we're really grateful for all our sponsors. So just go to patreon.com, Patreon, and then search for a Green Future, and we'll pop right up there. We've got varying levels of membership. We have both a dog lovers and a cat lovers membership level. So, if you go and you see just the dog lovers, keep scrolling down and you'll see the cat lovers. It's right there. So, all right. So those are our sponsors for whom we are very grateful. So now on to this is the part of the show where we talk about eco news and things that are happening in the news ecology-wise.
All right.
And unfortunately, we have a very sad environmental news story to report this week. There was a fellow in Mexico. His name was Homero Gomez Gonzalez, and he was unfortunately murdered this past week. Well, actually, he was murdered maybe 10 days ago. It's not exactly clear. But the reason this is environmental news is that Homero was a farmer and he was a logger, but then he realized that he lives in the Michoacan province of Mexico, which is where all the monarch butterflies in North America go to spend the winter. So those butterflies you see flying south in the fall, they are in a tremendous migration flying all the way to this province in Mexico. And Homero started out as a logger thinking he had to cut the trees down to survive and feed his family, the trees that the monarch butterflies roost in during the winter. But then he realized that there was more benefit to the whole community and maybe into all of North America to protect those trees, and let the monarchs winter there unmolested, because then people could come and see the wintering, which is just an incredible, dazzling display of black and orange, millions and millions of monarch butterflies covering the trees and the ground in this huge, intense living carpet. And he realized that if he could open that up so that people from all over the world could come and see it, there would not only be more benefit for the monarchs, but it would actually be more beneficial for his community, and it would sustain people and feed them and clothe them and shelter them longer than just simply cutting down the trees in those forests. So he established a reserve. He established a protected reserve, and he had to fight for it for years. And he still has a Twitter account. And if you go to that Twitter account, you can see as recently as January 13th, as the monarchs were coming down into, as they're wintering there, he was showing videos of the monarchs in the reserve and inviting people to come down and see them. And
which is really perfect that his name was Homer, because Homer is legendary, the ancient Greek writer who wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad, which is about a man, Odysseus, who was forced to leave his home and go fight in a war. and then his journey to come back and reclaim his home.
Mm-hmm. And he reclaimed those reserves for the monarchs, and unfortunately, he was murdered for it. He was discovered in a well. He'd had a head injury, so someone knocked him out and threw him in a well, and that's where he died.
So in life, as in Greek mythology, heroes don't live long, happy retirements sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Well, unfortunately for environmental activists, this is an all too common story.
Yeah.
And according to the Global Witness, you can check this out on their website, globalwitness.org. In 2018, there were over 164 murders of environmentalists and environmental activists around the world.
A lot of those in Brazil, Because don't the indigenous activists keep posing the fires and getting murdered a lot lately?
Yeah, there's been an uptick in Brazil. Actually, the Philippines are the worst.
Wow.
Yeah, they had 30 murders. This is 2018 figures. They had 30 murders of environmentalists in the Philippines, 24 in Colombia, 23 in India, 20 in Brazil, 16 in Guatemala, 14 in Mexico. So, only 14, but every one of those people, and then other countries, Democratic Republic of Congo, Iran, Honduras, Ukraine, had 10 or fewer. Every one of those people was precious. Every one of those people were making sacrifices in their own personal lives, in the comfort and safety of their families in order to try to protect the environment, which protecting the environment is literally protecting all of us, because it's the environment that supports us. And so when someone like that is murdered, it's not just a brief economic loss. It's not just a random crime. It's literally a crime against nature, because nature's defenders are out there trying to save the planet, not just for themselves, but for all of us. And so we have suffered a loss because Homero Gomez Gonzalez got murdered.
And these are the people who are really, literally, they're dying just for standing up and saying, I'd like my grandchildren and great-grandchildren to have a world that they can live in.
Right. And so I wanted to ask you folks a question, and you don't have to get on the air to answer this question. You could just call in, and Russell will take your name and number. Would anyone listening be interested in going down to Mexico and visiting this monarch butterfly reserve? Because I have a corporation, For a Green Future LLC, and I could, through that corporation, organize a trip down there. And if I had half a dozen people that were willing to go and willing to take a look down there and see what it's like, I would organize a trip down there. So just putting the feeler out there. If you think that's something you'd like to see, millions of monarchs all gathered together, and remember Homero Gomez Gonzalez by essentially granting him his last wish, because one of the very last videos he ever posted was an invitation for everyone in the world to come down there. If you want to do that, you can call right now at 866-240-1065. Let us know. We'll take your name and number and get back in touch with you. Or you can email me at joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org. And, if I get enough people who want to do this, I will make it happen. So, all right. Well, something else that we've made happen here on For a Green Future is we've made contact with my great-great-granddaughter in the year 2300.
Wow. Again, I guess she made it through last week, which was
she did, right.
Scary.
Yeah.
Things getting scary on Mars.
Yeah, it was a terrible problem on Mars. And so this is kind of the denouement from that whole, climax, as they say. But
all right.
Dear great-great-grandpa, what a difference a month makes. I'm flying back to Earth on a ship that's almost identical to the one that took me here, but that trip was full of excitement and expectation. I was one of only a few passengers carrying mostly vital cargo to the Mars colony. Now the load of cargo that was on this ship lies mostly dumped on the cold, harsh plains of Mars. The ship is filled with hundreds of Martian refugees, people forced to flee when the bacteria they had unwisely introduced into the Martian soil rotted out the pressure domes they needed to live in. Thousands more will be shipped back on the next flight. A few hundred will never be able to leave because they were born on Mars and can't handle Earth's gravity. Maybe we'll be able to salvage the situation, perhaps with viruses or finding a material for domes that will resist the bacteria. But right now, it's just a disaster. When I was flying to Mars, I was excited about seeing my brother Sam again. Now he's hidden himself in the deepest part of the ship and won't even talk to me. The other ex-colonists are actually hostile to me. Somehow the rumor got started that I was responsible for what happened to the domes.
Yeah, of course it did.
Yeah. I'm a bacteriologist, and I was using their lab equipment without permission, so it's not a big leap to try to suspect me of sabotage when things seem to be going so well. Of course, it wasn't me. It was greed and impatience that led to a disaster. The ironic thing is that they are the ones who will face a hard time when we get back to Earth. The people of my time kind of define themselves as being better than the people of your time. More environmentally aware, more cautious, more careful about ecology. We've cleaned up the Earth, and we're proud of that. But the Mars colonists have shown us that all those destructive attitudes from your time are still there in our psyche, just waiting to come out. Many people's careers are ruined. It's going to be hard for anyone with a history as a Mars colonist to find work. Oh well, I hope Sam will talk to me again before we get back to Earth. Love you, GGG. Marie I. So, definitely a sad letter from my great-great-granddaughter. And, of course, Sam is my great-great-grandson, too, so I'm also torn about what's happening to him. So.
Well, it's a serious point. There's a tendency in humanity for short-term thinking that we need to evolve beyond.
Yeah, or I would say we have to evolve beyond.
Basically.
Or else we're going to stop evolving.
Right.
Because we may not, we may not survive that learning curve if we don't follow it.
There might be certain tabula rasa back to unicellular organisms or something that goes on here soon.
Well, let's hope not.
Yeah.
I like multicellular organisms. I think they're cool.
They're fun. They're interesting. Yeah. They do more stuff. You can see them. Yeah. I don't know.
All right. So, just a few more minutes left in the show. You can still plenty of time for a call at 866-240-1065. We've covered a huge territory this week.
We have.
We've gone from the Super Bowl to Mars and back again. So,
all the important stuff.
Right. So now, one thing that did happen this past week is we got a very long and thoughtful letter from Mark, who lives in Bowling Green. And I wanted to, first thank Mark for taking the time to write this letter. He points out in the letter that he's an extremely busy person who works long hours, and so, I really appreciate him taking the time to send me an email. But what he was calling about was last week we were focused on the Trump administration's decision to eliminate half the wetlands in the United States of America by simply saying, oh, those aren't wetlands anymore. And Mark actually supports President Trump, and he I can't, the letter's too long. I don't have time to read it all. But basically he describes a situation where the corporation he works for owns an old quarry that they want to fill in, but they have been stopped by the wetland regulations. And the problem with this is, and I think that this is an important point to make, is that people have forgotten what corruption is. People have forgotten that what being self-serving over being societal serving or community serving is. They think that increasing their profits somehow is being, for the greater good, when actually what happens here is that he says that they've got this quarry and it's only a few feet deep now because it's filled mostly back in by itself, but they want to fill it in the rest of the way. And he says there's only a couple willow trees and some water plants around it. And the thing is that this whole region used to be a wetland. I mean, literally the entire region was one gigantic wetland.
And if the wetlands don't soak up that water coming down from the sky, where's it going to go?
Right. It's going to just
go
run
to the
off.
river.
And
It's going to flood like crazy.
And it's going to flood. And so what happens is remaining places like this that, maybe a quarry with aquatic plants around it isn't the best wetland there is, but in many cases it's the only kind of wetland left in a region.
Yep.
And so that quarry that he described is probably giving shelter and food to things like great blue herons, kingfishers. Some plants that he mentioned, those plants could be very rare native marsh plants right now, because we have done such a good job of tiling and draining the Great Black Swamp that there's only a few places left where these plants can grow. And so this is a case where he's thinking, I'm supporting this because it increases the short-term profits of my corporation. But he doesn't realize that is actually a corrupt position, that you're saying, hey, it benefits me, it's great. He's not even thinking about the larger community, the larger situation. And he also talks a little bit in terms of farming and how farm runoff is damaging things. He talks about my farmer. So in other words, his corporation is employing a farmer who is
what does he use it a pet? What is my farmer?
I don't know exactly what that meant. But basically, if you're hurting the rest of society, if you're hurting the rest of the environment that supports everyone for your own benefit, that's corrupt. And so I appreciate you taking the time to write in, Mark, but I strongly disagree with you. So that's it for this week's show. This is Joe DeMare
and Rebecca Wood
signing off.
I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit